of Instagram. What I've been trying to figure out for myself is how I use it as a creator person, because yes, I do the podcast. Yes, I share on LinkedIn. That's my main platform. But for some reason, I've always felt the need to also have Instagram, because I do like to go on it myself and it feels like a very easy thing to do. But actually where I am now, and I'm probably going to make some kind of a commitment around this for myself, is I've taken it off and I'm actually going to step back from using it for work purposes, because it's not where I get my business from. That would be LinkedIn. And actually what I've noticed is it's a distraction for me.
This is the Executive Coach Podcast with me, Maya Gudka, where I help you tune in to work and lives that feel spacious, successful, and aligned with who you truly are. Having worked with hundreds of leaders, I know that when we're properly supported and with great prioritization and planning, we really can have it all with ease. So let's stop the overwork and dive in. So if you've ever wondered whether your screen time or social media usage is optimal, this is the conversation for you, particularly against the backdrop of the recent movement around smartphones and teens. You might have questioned your own screen use, especially if you're an Instagram user or a TikTok user. Certainly on the groups that I've been joining that are very much raising awareness around smartphones and teens, this is something that comes up, that we want to be role modeling and have full awareness of what's going on with these platforms when we are then thinking about the implications for our kids. So today you're going to hear the benefits that Prerna experienced when taking a year off Instagram. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of such platforms, both as consumers and business owners. And this is obviously underpinned by science, including my own published research, really around how we can optimize our usage when we know what that algorithm is up to. We want to have our eyes open when we are using these platforms about what's really going on. And we talk about the changes we plan to make going forward in our businesses and our consumption. And I can say from the many client conversations that I've had, often it can be really small changes that we need to make that can unlock so much focus, mental space, bandwidth, and can have such an impact in our lives. And they impact both our productivity at work and the quality of the rest of our lives. So it is absolutely central to this podcast. And I hope that as you listen, you maybe rethink or think through some of your own usage and what you might be able to do differently. Let's dive in.
I have got my lovely friend Prerna with me today on the show, and I wanted to introduce Prerna. I have been on her show, which is not an episode that I think I've shared. Sometimes I do share guest episodes on my own podcast, but it's definitely one to refer back to. So we'll link it because I think it represented the time that we were in. It was during COVID and we were talking about social media at the time. And Prerna is the founder of Technically Spiritual, which is designed to help humans detach their time and attention from their technology so that we can all feel more connected, decrease suffering, tend to the planet, and make systemic changes for the collective good. And I wanted to read all of those things out because I am going to be picking Prerna's brains on a few of those elements. And it's quite a unique master's that Prerna did. So I also wanted to share that because I do find that fascinating. It was at Columbia University's Spirituality Mind Body Institute. And do you want to just share, before I hand over to you properly, the actual title of your master's? Because I think it was quite interesting.
Yeah, it was a psychology and education master's program, but the program was called the Spirituality Mind Body Institute. So it was looking at psychology and spirituality, sort of the intersection of those things. So looking at spirituality with some scientific data and research that supports things like prayer and remembering past lives and meditation and like all different types of things. So it was really interesting.
And I just think it's such a unique perspective that Prerna brings. As I talk about a lot on this podcast, I'm a big follower of Cal Newport, who talks about the intersection of technology, ethics, but also the way we think and productivity. And I think it's really cool here that we've got some intersection, but with that spirituality element. So really excited to have Prerna. And also just need to explain, I always sort of say how I came to know people. We just met online, like we probably through social media, we might have to admit, right? Is that correct?
I think I have a vague memory, and thank you for the compliment. But I think I remember that I found your podcast, a different podcast with Aarti.
Yes.
I found that when I was looking for something. And then I think I was like, oh, I really like this person. And then I found you on Instagram and connected.
That is
so technically cool. The inception was a podcast.
Oh, you know what? I am so much
yeah.
happier with that story.
Yeah, because we'll stick to that. Yeah,
because I also just need to say a couple of other things about Prerna. First of all, this will be embarrassing to her, but she just has the ultimate podcast voice, and I hope you guys all enjoy that. And the second thing is that Prerna, you were actually quite instrumental in my podcast because you interviewed me, and then Nir Eyal found us both. And he then did conversations with us. And that was sort of like a little big break for the podcast, because then it was much easier for me to have Laura Vanderkam on. And it's that kind of spiral effect. So that's my rambling introduction to Prerna. And shall I hand it over to you to say anything in response to any of that?
Oh my gosh, thank you. That was such a sweet introduction, and I admire you so much, and I'm so happy that we are connected. And I thought it was amazing that we had a conversation, I think in 2020, and now it's basically 2024, and we're still in touch, and we're still like cheerleaders for each other, and we're doing the conversation again, which we said we're like, let's have another one at some point. And sometimes people just say that, and now we're actually doing it. So, I've just loved being in community with you, and I had a similar effect on my podcast after our conversation. It's sort of having that conversation with Nir Eyal, and getting other guests, and sort of it helped us level up. And that was just, I think, coming from just an organic conversation that we had about technology, and this is this book that we both really like, and so I appreciate it. I'm excited to dive in.
Brilliant. And so I also thought I would join some dots since 2020, because at that time, Prerna was talking about Instagram, actually, and she was talking about the fact that she was going to leave or take a huge break. And I always said I was going to check in with her, because at that time I was doing my research into how we could use positive psychology and have a more informed approach to the way that we utilize these things to give us a sense of control, which then, as the other update, I guess, went on to be published. And without me having lent into it too much, it still comes up. So I will still deliver talks and things, and it will still come up. So it's nice that it lives on. I didn't know in which guise, given how fast technology moves. So the first thing that we're going to do is dive in a little bit to our current use of, starting with social media and maybe Instagram, and then any other technology as well. And so I wanted to ask Prerna, so what was your experience of then taking that break? And do you want to just tell us about how that was and now where you are with it?
Totally. The break was just the best. I was at a point with it because, again, remember, you have to kind of go back in time to that period where we were in lockdown and everybody's emotions were really high and fight or flight, and we had different political leaders, and there was a lot of just kind of fear in the air, and a lot of watching news that was really detrimental. In some ways, things are not that different from now, but I think that element of lockdown definitely had an impact, because more of us were just kind of glued to the screens 24/7, because that was the way of interacting. I made a decision, I believe it was August of 2020, that I would take 1 year off of Instagram, because that was the one that was sort of sucking me in, and where I felt like I was losing my mind a little bit, literally losing mindfulness while I was on there. And I just, and I'm happy to share the link to the blog that I wrote of all the reasons why I decided to take the break, coming from just my own personal addictive feelings to the sort of bigger not wanting to support companies with unethical business models. And I was learning a lot about that, the behind the scenes stuff. This was before that movie came out, The Social Dilemma, which I think highlighted a lot of these things. But I was really deep into that research during that time too. And I was like, you know what, I'm done. So I took a year. It may have been a month shy. I can't remember. I had to come back on because I wanted to raise money to donate to support folks in India that were suffering, because there was also like another wave of COVID in India. I don't know if you remember, in 2021, that was really, really bad. And I wanted to raise money and like to have an event for it. And I was like, okay, the best way to promote the event is through social. So I think I like hopped back on at like 11 months or something and then came back off. But yeah, I mean, taking a break for a year was it's a powerful amount of time, right? Because you can take a break for a week and then you just sort of like fall right back into your habits. But a year is a lot. Like a year is like you can change as a person in a year. The world changes. There's a lot that goes on and you just learn a lot about your own habits. And I really felt that sort of stickiness of it disappear, where even to this day, I have come back on and I use it. I don't know. I don't have as much of a routine with it. Like sometimes I'll use it because I have to use it for my business and then I'll get maybe caught up. And then I'll delete it for a couple months and like not even care. And then I'll get back on. And like, it's just this kind of experience. It's like, if I want to be on it, I can download it, I can use it, but it's never on my home screen. It's never the thing that my thumb just automatically goes to. And if I do notice those things, like if I've had it on my phone for a couple of weeks and it becomes this sort of default activity where I'm just in it and then all of a sudden I wake up to reality and I'm like, oh, why am I here? Then I delete it again for a couple of weeks because I'm like, oh no, this has become sticky again. Let me get out of here. But taking the year was just so powerful because I was able to really connect with people just in my life. Like I was able to focus on the podcast. I was able to set up, Zoom calls to meet. I would text my friends funny memes or whatever, like have them text me pictures of whatever event. Again, there weren't that many events. There weren't like weddings, babies, whatever, all this kind of stuff going on. So I think like the timing of it was, I had less FOMO than I maybe would have had now. Like if I take a month or two off now, so much happens in people's lives. And then I'm like, oh, sorry, I totally forgot I didn't realize you got married. So sorry, I'm wishing you like 3 months later. Stuff like that. So anyway.
I guess there's a few bits there that it would be cool to pick up on. The one is that what did you miss or what do you now value from having been off, which might be a little bit clearer for you? That's one question I have. The other question I have is, I guess, wrestling with that issue that as a business we might have, which is that we do need to have certain presences. And so it's like, well, if we're willing to use it for our businesses and yet we kind of want to in some way boycott it, like it's a little bit like the kind of, people will start talking about, well, if you're vegetarian, but you might have leather shoe, like a leather purse. So, do you know what I mean? So I think there's that. And I'd love to know, because I'm sure you would have thought about that type of thing, whether you have any comments on that, because, it's like, well, I wanted to go on to do something important for India, for example, as you described. It's like, well, how do we get that balance right between perhaps not being wanting to support that bigger corporation and then yet having to use its infrastructure for something because we know it's good?
Okay, well, it's sort of related. In terms of what I missed, I think there is this element, there is a little bit of an element of social connection, which I hate to admit because that's what these social media companies promote. And I'm like, you guys promote social connection, but your business model is not designed for that. But social media or social connection tends to be a byproduct, which can feel addictive, right? Because it feels like, oh, this is the place of belonging. If I'm not involved here, then I'm missing out in some way, or I'm an outsider, or I'm an outcast. It's not normal, I think, for people to I shouldn't say the word normal. It just is not usually the thing that's done for people to not have social media or take such a long break. So I think part of it, there was a little bit of that kind of FOMO, or like I'm missing out on something, or I'm not going to see something that might be really important. And a lot of it is like, in activism spaces, like what's going on, who's organizing, is there something that I should be supporting, those types of things, because that stuff is not so, like, you can read the news in a newspaper, and that's one thing, but like actual people that are getting together and doing things and, promoting stuff and having events. And those are the types of things, if I'm not on their newsletter, I don't know about them or whatever, then it's harder to be in touch. And that sort of relates to the business side of having social media, where I did kind of go back and forth for a while, where I was like, if I'm a company that's promoting mindful tech use, is Instagram a platform that I do want to be using? And just like with myself, I was like, I need to use this in a mindful way, and I need to be using it to promote mindfulness. So many of the posts, of course, there's like podcast announcement posts and stuff like that, but I try to be really deliberate in the posts to have the posts actually serve as a mindful break in the experience of scrolling, right? So to have a little break that says, hey, stop scrolling, take a couple of deep breaths. Or do you know why you're on this platform right now? Not all of my posts, but there's a lot of those types of things in there, which I find that, is aligned with my mission to support mindfulness and also just to meet people where they are. Because if people are suffering and struggling with, social media addiction, they need to be reminded in the moment of that experience of suffering, right? So that's part of how and why I use it, even though there is a little bit of like that ethical dilemma. And there's a little bit of privilege I can admit too, because I do have a couple of folks that work for me. Like I can have the luxury of deleting Instagram off my phone for several months and my posts are still going out because I have a social media person to help me with it, which I think a lot of companies do, but
absolutely. Or
full transparency with that too.
Yeah, but you could use a scheduling tool for the same thing.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Hootsuite or whatever.
It's really, to me, I think it's like we don't have to be completely black or white about this. You can acknowledge that there are things that you're wrestling with, and you can therefore take a certain approach without having it to be completely binary. And I think that's what you share really well. And I do think that it sounds like you going away and coming back, you are much more intentional, even with the content that you share. So it's actually really powerful to have had that break and then come on. Cal Newport has just shared an awesome episode called How to Think. I don't think he always titles his episodes beautifully, but it talks exactly about where we should be getting our information from and how we can get into deeper thinking. And actually, I think at this time of year, I was just leading a end of year reflection for a company, and a lot of the stuff was around screen use. So I think people are really mindful of this right now. And I wanted to also just chime in with, the things that I noticed, because I'm on and off Instagram. I will delete it from my phone very quickly at the minute I notice it creeping in, because it does play to my, whatever the word is, my interest a little bit more than, say, my husband, who can just like forget about it, because I like the food stuff that I see on there, like the interiors that I see. And actually, as part of ahead of this conversation, I had a little flick through yesterday and I was looking at my feed and I was like looking for the posts that could be in some way not helpful to me. And actually, I've got to a point now where every single post is either like a beautiful positive psychology, like visual that I really like, or it's cool food stuff and cooking ideas, or it's house stuff. So it's actually a lovely feed. So I'm a good consumer now of Instagram. What I've been trying to figure out for myself is how I use it as a creator person, because yes, I do the podcast. Yes, I share on LinkedIn. That's my main platform. But for some reason, I've always felt the need to also have Instagram, because I do like to go on it myself and it feels like a very easy thing to do. But actually where I am now, and I'm probably going to make some kind of a commitment around this for myself, is I've taken it off and I'm actually going to step back from using it for work purposes, because it's not where I get my business from. That would be LinkedIn. And actually what I've noticed is it's a distraction for me. And what I will sometimes do is I'll share things quickly on there and be like, okay, well, I've shared it now. It's done. Actually, I should be using my emails, or I should be using LinkedIn. My Instagram is so small now. I've completely culled it. My reach is tiny. So it doesn't even really do the job for me. So I do think that, if you want to do it properly, it is an investment of time. I have a lot of respect for creators on there. I think people can make it look easy. I don't think it's easy at all to be able to regularly share and show up. I have the utmost respect for people that manage to do that in a way that is inspiring and cool. So I think I've been moving back into consumer mode, and that works quite well for me, actually, to be more of a consumer. But I do like to create on there every now and then. I like to be able to create a fun reel or something. But it's for me. It's not business. It's not going to work for my business. So that's where I am with it. I just think it's nice to.
Yeah, no, everything that you just said completely resonates with me, especially as I've been thinking about, and I know we're going to talk about year-end reviews. But I've been thinking about this especially for myself because there is this sort of illusion or like trap that you can fall into with Instagram as a business leader. And you and I have similar businesses. I also, my clients are B2B clients.
Yeah.
Like I also work within organizations and do teaching within companies and stuff like that. So my clients are not finding me through Instagram. That's not where I'm getting business. Like I've generated $0 off of Instagram. I'm just using it sort of as almost like a portfolio. Like, hey, this is what's going on with me and the brand and where you can find events and different types of things, which it didn't always start that way. I started, I set out with a company. When I first started, I was like, I'm serving everyone. You kind of find your niche later on. I was like, this is for everyone. And it started the Instagram to be like a B2C thing when I was doing more events and, hey, come join us at this thing where there was a direct objective. But I think what you're talking about, like being an influencer is a whole other thing, right? Like to use it as a generating income or like buy a certain thing off of this post or whatever, or make money off of posts is a whole other.
There's two routes that I've learned about. Obviously there's this influencer route, which does look exhausting. And then there's also, as a business owner, there is another route, which is the regular content creation that is fiercely targeted at your audience. But even that is a lot of work. So
for sure.
I'm not even doing that. And so actually I realized, and I had a business coach this year, so we actually said for me, it's more nurture. So it's like I will maybe, and I have alerted people to like come and see me on there and I might share more life stuff, So it's like there's an element of like little community. Maybe it's more chatty than LinkedIn. Maybe you can have more of a chat with people. So I do value it for that. I do love stories. I do love sharing. My husband said to me recently, it's like, why have you just shared your lunch on Instagram? I was like, no, you don't understand. I'd just done a big talk and I was treating myself to a solo lunch and like I had support from people and we were having a dialogue about it. And it was just like, I don't know what to make of that conversation, but maybe it's the sign that I need to get off the platform, right? But for me, it was like I was sharing a sort of what felt like a significant moment. And as a solopreneur, who do you share with? You like to maybe the people that are on your stories and that you chat to. And I'm somebody that if I look at other people's stories, I like to engage with them. I don't like to just be a viewer. I like to sort of, if possible, send some sort of a acknowledgement. So those are the things that I do like. But, I'm always looking for what's going to be the big needle mover for me in like, say, going forward. And unfortunately for me, a big needle mover, I think next year is going to be getting that thing off my phone and getting it out of my business strategy so that I can actually lean into a platform that is serving me really well, which is LinkedIn, and also like emails and things, which also are good and important. So
I totally agree with you. And one of the things that has brought me so much joy in my business that I feel like I really nurture is my newsletter. And I only send it once a month, but I put my whole self into it and, what people respond. And like, it's it's a really nice way of having those conversations and connection in a little bit more of an intimate way. And I know email can still get lost and your stuff can go in spam and, but it's just the fact that if somebody opens your email, that's, they're being present with you for a minute or two or 5 or 10 or whatever. And I think that's just it's just a more wholesome experience than, it's almost like a letter compared to Instagram, which is just like a quick little story, which I do appreciate, having, met people at events and then connecting quickly on Instagram and sort of keeping up with a couple of things that they're doing and like knowing about what's going on. But other than that, I think, in terms of like the depth for me is not
Yes.
there as much. So I agree with you. And for my business strategy for next year, it's not going to be part of the picture as much.
And can I double check, and I won't linger on this too long, but do you therefore focus on LinkedIn, given that you're B2B?
I need to.
You need to. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think what you had said before, where I was like, oh, I'm going to focus on creating this post, and I'll put it on Instagram. Okay, I'm done. I've said it. I've done it. Right. And then like LinkedIn for me has sort of maybe been like back burner, or sometimes I'll repost on there. But yeah, I was like, oh, actually, I need to readjust my strategy a little bit and have that be the main place. And then Instagram can be the thing that, is supplemental.
And it's just like the numbers are just so different, So like I had insights on recently on my Instagram, and it's like it will share to some fraction of my already tiny audience. And whereas a good post on LinkedIn, and it will share to the full size, but then sometimes it will like dwarf the size of your audience. It will just go crazy.
Yeah.
So it's just like because and I feel like this is just the algorithmic piece, but it's like when somebody likes that, then other people in the network see. Like I feel like that kind of growth element is much more transparent on there. So I don't know. I do think it is. I think it took me a while actually to get going on it, and I've only really found my momentum in the last year, like last three or 4 months actually, and I've really sort of been enjoying that. But I'm going to move on.
Yeah, that's good. Now. Yeah, I want to learn from you, but that we can have a separate conversation about that.
Yeah, definitely.
So that concludes part 1 of this 2-part episode. Part 2 will release on Thursday, and if you don't want to miss it and you're not already subscribed, I highly recommend hitting that subscribe button.
Thank you for listening to Life Work with Maya. If you've got to this point, I'm guessing you found it valuable, so do share the link with somebody else who can benefit. In an age of materialism and us trying to stay on top of clutter, what could be nicer than to send a non-clutter digital link to somebody and say, I listened to this and I thought you might love it. What a great way to show your care and consideration for them. If you haven't left a review, now is the time, and make sure that you are subscribed on Spotify or you're following along on Apple Podcasts. And if you really want to help the show grow, then do share the link on IG stories, Instagram stories, or reshare or discuss your thoughts with my LinkedIn posts. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Do feel free to send me messages there. I love having dialogue with my listeners, and the links to those handles are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.